everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. Happy week. I hope you have been excelling. I hope you've been enjoying the lift in the ethers that's been coming. We've got Mars going direct finally. Yay! Because during this election, we had a lot of really weird planetary alignments that were in retrograde. We had Mars was a huge one in retrograde, and Mercury had been retrograde right up until November 3rd, and where everything went forward. So now we've got this Mars energy at our back again, and that's going to give you a spring in your step to finish projects. Anybody who's been starting something has been having a really hard time getting your mojo with it. That's not unusual, especially if Mars goes retrograde. Mars is sort of your butt kicker planet. And when Mars goes retrograde, that's kind of the Ferdinand the Bull, lie in the pasture, eat some flowers, just really chew on life and look in the stars and the sky. And anyway, so now that we've got Mars going direct, we've got Mercury direct, this is a time frame to really begin to manifest and to bring in that which you have been wanting to bring in. And, we talk a lot about manifestation in the metaphysical community. One of the things that we also talk about are rising to a different ether or a different dimension, or how to get out of the third dimensional heaviness or density to move up to the fifth or ninth dimensional lightness and all of these things. And really, we start to lose people in translation when we start to talk about how to move from these densities of ether, because people are like, what the hell does that even mean, man? I live in the third dimension, and I have a dog, and it poops in the backyard, and I have to pick it up, and I have bills I have to pay. So can you please explain to me what this whole dimensional shift is all about? And I've covered that in multiple podcasts in what a dimensional shift is, how different dimensions actually exist next to one another. And one of the things that I want to really kind of just lightly focus on to get into our topic today is when we do have lots of concurrent dimensions running. So think about people movers in an airport, except imagine one people mover that's kind of slow and one a little faster and one a little faster and one a little faster. You really need to go from one people mover to the next, because if you try to jump across, say there's 5 of them, and you try to jump across to the third or fourth one if you've got a lot of spring in your hamstrings, and the one people mover is going pretty slow, you're going to get knocked off your feet landing on the people mover that's hauling butt, because, landing on something that's moving that quickly is going to knock you down. And this is why when we talk about the ascension process, which, honestly, I know I shouldn't sound like such a snot about it, yet I found that there's so many people in my field that just get so caught up with, I'm ascended and you're not ascended. And all I can think about is, well, clearly you're not ascended if you're acting like an asshat. That's just flat rude, okay? Not really ascended behavior. So when we're talking about making the jump or the move up in frequency, I'm going to use the word frequency rather than dimensions. Even though we're talking about dimensions, we're talking about densities, we're talking about all of it. When we go to tune our frequency to a station with less static on it, that's really what we're talking about in today's podcast. And today's podcast is all about how to survive in a divided world, because that's the reality. And, there's a lot of people that will argue that that's not the reality. The reality is the world is crap. Or somebody will argue that that's not the reality. I'm in too much heaviness or low frequency or too much density, so I'm not seeing that it's all perfect and all beautiful. Well, the fact of the matter is that we've been raising from the third dimension to the fourth for a long time. But again, that's a spiritual resonation issue, and I don't want to convolute the podcast too much today. So we're just going to say the third dimension, so you know what I'm talking about, all right? Even though that's not entirely accurate, but for the sake of time. So here we are hanging out in this every day-to-day dimension. And we're noticing that certain people are tuning their frequency up to really be able to get a hold of beautiful concepts and beautiful memes and beautiful messaging and positive forward movement. And then there's a group of people that are terrified still. There's a lot of Americans right now, 70 million plus, that voted for Donald Trump. And a lot of those folks, not them all, obviously, but a lot of those people truly feel like the end of America is upon them because they were sold some very heavy marketing materials regarding presidential candidate Joe Biden around how he was going to come in and make this a socialist country and do all these crazy, scary things. And from those folks' perspective, okay, that's the end of America. So we have 70 million plus folks out there freaking melting down and panicking. Again, not all of them. Some of them are like, okay, he didn't win, moving on. Yet a lot of these folks have really bought into the fear consciousness of here comes another presidential candidate and he's going to sink us all and make us into something America is not and all these things. So what I think is so intriguing from that perspective is that when we are looking at this dimensional shift or how to exist in a divided world, what I'm talking about is I'm taking some extremely fine point concepts and really just boiling it down to one conversation. Because I honest to God, I really wear out. I'm not even going to lie. I wear out even talking to some of my own colleagues in this field who just are absolutely unwilling to look at the fact that some people aren't on the happy train. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a jerk here, but that chaps my keister. That drives me nuts. It drives me nuts because of my calling. It drives me nuts because of my work in the world, which is to survey what's actually going on and comment on it, break it down, translate it, pass it on, and then you all get to make decisions about what you think about all of that, okay? So my job is translator. That's always been my job. Ergo, it makes me a bit frustrated when I run across folks who do not want to look at the fact that the entire world isn't operating through the lens of happy unicorns, rainbows, and free soft serve ice cream. Now that's my universe, and you are welcome to join me there at any time. Yet it's very difficult to do my job as translator if I do not cover the fact that not everybody is on the happy train. And if we look at the 4 years prior to this election, and I'm just using the election stuff, gang, it's such low-hanging fruit for example and really teachable moments. However, if we look at the last 4 years, there's been 70 plus million people who've been extremely happy with the way that the United States has been operating. They've been very happy with the fact that we've closed our borders down and built a wall and all these other things. That's worked for a lot of people. Now, obviously, I know a lot of people who voted for Mr. Trump who didn't like the fact that they were separating families at the border and all these other moments in time. So I do think it's important that we don't completely stereotype 70 million people. That's a lot of people. However, now a lot of those folks are freaking out. So why am I referencing politics? Well, because it's very easy to see the divided world that we live in, and it's very important to begin to talk about the different lenses of consciousness and the different frequency vibrations or dimensions that those create. Okay, so, for some people, I understand that trauma is huge. It's huge. And actually, all of us who've grown up in the 20th century and earlier even, if anybody's still hanging on, God bless you, we were raised in a bully, abusive culture. And especially, for women, oh my God, and people of color, and anyone who was not a heterosexual person. I mean, this was rough. So it was rough for men as well because men needed to act like these bizarre automatons who never had any feelings and never could be wrong. And I mean, that's just psychotic. The old world was fucking nuts. It was crazy. So, when we look at this, we think, I don't want to go back to that. Yet it's important to note that what we're attempting to do right now is figure out how do we coexist in a divided world. And I'm saying world because it doesn't matter whether you are in the United States or the UK. It doesn't matter where you're at. There are two concurrent dimensions occupying the same exact space in space-time on the planet Earth right now. Now, again, I'm going to have a lot of practitioners that are going to email me and say, well, there are many dimensions of consciousness. Yes, I know it, gang. Yet we're talking about the two predominant ones that are taking sucker punches at each other right now. So I appreciate all of my fellow practitioners out there who split these spiritual dynamics down to the nubbin. I get it. I'm with you. Yet to help people understand what's going on, we really do have two big main consciousness elements that are at play. So we've got this dimension of fear and anger and rage. And I was talking to a dear friend of mine the other day. I was talking, as a matter of fact, Mary Erickson, who is my co-producer on Road Angel. And we were talking about how do you empower people in this particular day and age when so many people feel so disempowered. And that disempowerment goes back centuries. It goes back generations. That disempowerment gets into our physical brain matter. That disempowerment starts with a lack of nutrition and all kinds of things that have created difficulties in our prefrontal cortex and just honest to God being able to put a conscious thought together, a critical thought together. So we've got chemicals working against us. We've got all sorts of radio waves, not just radio waves. We've got all kinds of cell phone waves. We've got all kinds of junk they're shooting through our stratosphere and our atmosphere that does affect the mind. It does affect the brain. Not as much radio waves. They're pretty slow. But we have a lot of other electronic devices, Bluetoothing, everything that does affect our critical thinking process. So when we look at this, and I'm talking to Mary about how do we affect consciousness with all of this outside force, as well as the embedded genetic need to be hypervigilant, because post-traumatic stress is passed down generationally, gang. And think about the financial collapse in the 1920s in the United States, okay? Obviously, we're focusing on fear consciousness first here. Yet, if you look at this from a strategic perspective, and you break it down, it really does make it much easier to understand why we have a divided world that we live in. Because as physical beings, okay, and we are physical beings, I recognize that many people are working on very high frequencies. I think that's amazing. I personally know people who operate on those very high, if you want to call them ascended frequencies, whatnot, and they have amazing health, and they can overcome things like cancer and lupus. Is that possible? Absolutely. Yet first, before you get there, if you're on the slow people mover, you can't exactly jump to the really fast people mover because it'll knock you on your butt and roll you onto another people mover, and then you're going to be afraid to try that leap again. So we're starting with the fear consciousness and the density or the heaviness of that, the low vibration. And if we understand, gang, that the reason that we're here is biological, it's sociological, it's mental, it's generational, it's in our DNA to have this post-traumatic stress response to finances, to lack and to limitation. I mean, it's big. And if you don't believe that to be true, if you're somebody who's like, well, that's ridiculous. I'm not subject to my DNA. I'm the master of my own being. Well, first of all, rock on for your bad self. That's awesome. Yet, I would like to point something out. And again, I'm going to use some low-hanging fruit here as a teachable moment. So President Donald Trump has lost this election. And although there are many, many very disappointed people that are circulating all sorts of misinformation about how there was cheating and all these things in this election, fact of the matter is, not all that many voted for Biden. I mean, what is that, 76 million-ish people? So really, I mean, 6 million people is a lot of people. Yet if you think about it, it's not like Biden won by a landslide, okay? Yet if you flip the pancake over and you look back at Trump didn't win by a landslide either. These were close elections. So we've got a lot of people who watched a very large group of liberal people over the last 4 years saying Donald Trump is in office because the election was rigged. So for those who have participated in those conversations, and I have participated in that conversation and broken down how actually they kind of got Donald Trump in there to a degree with what I could figure out psychically and otherwise, I would be contributing to that narrative, right? So then we've got 70 million people saying, well, wait a minute. You guys said that election was rigged. Now we're going to say this election is rigged. Plus we have the guy that we're supporting saying it's rigged. And we pretty much believe everything he says because he's supporting our lens or our version of the universe. And again, here's where living in a divided world comes in. So why am I bringing this up? Well, I'm bringing it up because on Twitter, my Twitter feed, my direct box in Twitter, my inbox, just gets blown up with people asking me questions about this election. And it's not as much about the election results, because again, I think it's pretty obvious that this particular election was the most monitored in United States history that we are aware of. Had record vote turnout, and people from both the Democratic and Republican parties were in observance as poll watchers. So, I mean, this was a highly monitored election because I think everybody was afraid there was going to be cheating on some level. The Republicans were afraid the Democrats were going to cheat. The Democrats were afraid the Republicans were going to cheat. So everybody was watching every single ballot. And that's one way that shared paranoia actually worked for the American people, which is, interesting. So anyway, what does this have to do with post-traumatic stress? What does this have to do with genetic stress? Well, in Twitter, and I always love hearing from you guys, so always hit me up, Twitter, Facebook, all of it. I may not be able to answer you right back because of my schedule, yet I read everything. So one of the questions I'm getting is post-traumatic stress related from people who did not agree with the way that President Trump ran his administration. It caused them a lot of stress. It caused them a lot of duress. And even though it's exceptionally clear that he has lost this election at this point through the recounts and everything else, even though that's true, this is an individual who has lived a life sowing chaos. That's just what he does, man. That's his business strategy. And quite frankly, he's not the only one. He learned that old world 20th century beat him up and crush him before they can get up off the mat modality from his dad. And Donald Trump is not the only CEO person who acts the way he does in big business. He's just the one that we've had our eyes on, right? So what does this have to do with post-traumatic stress? Well, I'll tell you. Even though it's really obvious he lost the election, I am still getting tons of questions on Twitter and Facebook. What's he going to do next? What's he going to do next? What's he going to do next? Why do we care? He lost. He literally, whether he was the guy you loved or the guy you hated, he lost. And at exactly 12:01 p.m. on January 20th of 2021, he will no longer be president because his contract will expire with the American people and the American government. He will be done. So it doesn't matter what he's going to do next because he's going to be done. He can't change any of this, gang, through the Supreme Court. Because what he's not understanding about those Supreme Court justices, and this is something I psychically see in every single one that he's appointed, that is their be-all, end-all career position. This is what they've worked for their whole lives. And they are not going to jeopardize their credibility as justices with the American people by being part of some petty coup with some political candidate who didn't win. That That ain't going to happen on any level. This is where Mr. Trump has overplayed his hand, always been able to buy off people and all these things, right? So at 73 years old, this is a person who has never withstood public disapproval or humiliation in his mind, or disappointment, or losing publicly. You know, he's always sued people. He's covered it up. He had fixers. So the desperation of this person, the American people are picking up on. And the post-traumatic stress comes in because this individual has been able to write his own ticket for 73 years up to this point. And we as the American people are used to waking up to absolutely outrageous headlines, right? And those headlines are coming from a place of that divided world. They are coming from that heaviness, that low vibration, that high density dimension of fear, oppression, and subjugation. And so we wake up every day with this heavy, slow, dark, weird, tattletale headlines that are chasing crappy behavior of an individual who, for all intents and purposes, really grew up in a bubble and was ill-suited from the beginning to be the leader of many because he's not even sure how to lead himself. He satiates himself, right? Not leads. He satiates himself. So this poor dude was just set up to fail from day one on this. So here he loses the election. I'm getting emails saying, oh my God, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? That is a post-traumatic stress response. Post-traumatic stress will override our critical thinking capacity, our, quote, common sense capacity, our rational thought capacity, and it will drive us into a hypervigilance where we are then literally like meerkats, like on our tiptoes and our little hannies are just flopped in front of us, and we're just looking around the prairie constantly because we're sure at any minute a hawk is going to swoop down and take one of our family members. Post-traumatic stress is embedded trauma. It is vibrational trauma. It is genetic trauma. And it's actually, it reminds me of tinnitus of the brain. That's the best way I can explain this to you. What is tinnitus, you might ask? Well, for we old rock and rollers, we know a thing or two about tinnitus. Tinnitus! So what is it? Well, it's when your ears ring, right? And you just have this mild ringing in your ears. Now, they being doctors, project that our generations, our younger generations, are going to have horrible problems with tinnitus because all they do is walk around with earbuds stuffed in their ear with the capacity to translate larger low-frequency signals or reproduce them through teeny earbuds, which, by the way, is rough on your ears. So tinnitus is when your ears ring and the little cilia, the little bitty hairs, you have little little hairs in your ear canals called cilia. And when sound waves go down your ear canals, they vibrate those little hairs. And in part, it's not just your eardrums, it's the little hairs too, are sending sound information based on the vibration of them to the brain. I mean, how freaking cool is that? Like think of them like tiny little seismographs that are picking up little vibrations. And the harder the vibration, the more those cilia rattle. And that's how we say, ow, 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 this is too loud. And actually the cilia act to protect the eardrum because the cilia are indicating, hey man, crap's getting real. We're standing in front of a guitar amp and we're all going to blow our eardrums out. And they help protect the eardrum. Well, here's the thing about the cilia. You keep cranking loud sounds in your ears over and over and over and over again. The poor little cilia become traumatized because they're constantly used to rattling and vibrating and trying to send a message to your brain that, hey, crazy person, there's too much input coming down here. And then they're just vibrating and vibrating and wiggling and wiggling and wiggling and wiggling. Well, you do that enough to your ears and your cilia just don't stop wiggling. They'll just keep wiggling. Because now you've kind of short-circuited their poor little brains and they just think that they're just in this hyper-vigilant state of constantly vibrating because they're just waiting for the next big impulse of vibration and they're assuming that you're going to overload your eardrum. So I want you to think about all of America. okay? Whether you're somebody who likes the president or doesn't. All of America has been, millions and millions of little cilia just vibrating like crazy because every day we were hit with the frequency response that was unbelievable. So everybody's just, the whole eardrum of America is ringing right now from literally being oversaturated with too much stimulus. So I want you to think about that post-traumatic stress response as a cilia in your ear, just ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. And then now there's, the volume has really come down. My God, Trump actually shut up for an entire week, except for a few tweets, which was, I don't know, amazing. I don't know if he was rocking back and forth, turning the light switch on and off, sucking on a corner of his pillow with his mascara streaking down his face for a week or what he was doing. But he was quiet, which was super weird. And actually, just as a sidebar, because he was so quiet, I was poking through the psychic ethers to see what he was doing. And that guy was imploding, man. He was literally raging at his staff. He was raging at his family. He was raging at people around him, but nothing could be done. So finally, he kind of pulled it together and recently made an announcement from the Rose Garden because he's still president. So he's, be nice if he'd do some president-y things before he's done. So when we talk about that low density, when we talk about a divided world, we have to understand why it's so easy to get sucked in to the negative and to the high density or to the low vibration. And it's because our psyches have been pounded and pounded and pounded to the point where even though this guy lost an election, I'm still getting email going, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? What's he going to do? Because everybody's vibrating like this. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So do you see how that works? Okay. So that vibration is constantly rolling in the world. And that vibration of trauma is real. And there are many amazing practitioners out in the world, from therapists to Reiki masters to energy workers to life coaches, that help people who have encountered huge trauma to let go of the trauma and to rewire the psyche and the spirit in order to not be just ringing like a cilia, waiting for the next great big overpowering frequency so that you can run back and protect everybody. And in this time frame, if you are someone that has found that you are having a hard time finding the positive in anything, if you're somebody who is just feeling like somebody took your hope and your soul and all of your best unicorn parts and stuck a barbed hook through it and pulled it to the depths of hell and poured gas on it and lit it on fire, I know a lot of people who feel that way. And I encourage you to talk to somebody about that, because this divided world that we're in, these two predominant people movers, these two predominant frequencies are going to continue to exist on this planet Earth for a long time. So is it eventually, can we get to a place of what we like to think of as a utopia, or everybody being in a very light, non-dense vibration? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That place is also called heaven. And if we don't make it in this lifetime, if we're not able to necessarily wrangle this plane of existence in that way, we're eventually going to get to another dimension where that's the operating system. Everybody's chill. Everybody gets along. It's awesome. Yet we do have a shot at dramatically uplifting the ethers here. It's just exceptionally important to not get your hopes dashed against the stones of hell, to acknowledge the fact that we do live in a divided consciousness plane of existence right now. And there are going to be some people, gang, that are just not going to want to get off their people mover. They like their people mover. They think all of the other dimensions of people moverness that are moving faster than them are the problem. And they're going to fight as hard as they can for that consciousness. And that is also a soul lesson, folks. It's not like everybody who's the ascended person or the person in the 9th dimension or the 7th dimension is any better than somebody in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th dimension. Everybody is here learning. So this is the best I've got right now, because I've been working on this problem for about 4 years with the angels. And this is the best I've got for you right now on how to cope with this. If you are someone that feels like the end of the world is upon you because Biden is now in the White House, I would tell you that there is going to be a different consciousness resonating on the outside of you that is going to be operating on a different frequency bandwidth that may make you uncomfortable, yet it is not against you. The folks in that bandwidth are here to do a job. They are here to lean forward in the evolution of the planet. They're here to prepare a space for the next generations. And so if you're someone listening who's like, oh my God, this guy's going to ruin our country. Well, no, he's not. He's not. Just like Trump couldn't ruin the country. He uncovered some very uncomfortable parts of our nation that have existed since the nation was founded. However, he didn't ruin it. He just brought some light to it. And in the days to come, in the history books, 20 years, 30 years down the road, where we do have more of that predominant co-creative system, not splitting the consciousness like it is on the globe, but it will be more of a 60, 70% consciousness. And the heavier, more dense vibration will be more of a minority consciousness, because the younger generations coming up, they don't want to hate each other. They want to work together, which is good because we need to do that. It's the older generations that were bullied and broken and indoctrinated by a sociopathic old world system that are trying to reprogram ourselves. The younger folks are like, I don't want to hate anybody. What the hell's wrong with everybody? God. So way to go, folks, young people. So what I'm looking at here, gang, is when we're operating in this divided world, what I would tell those who are operating in that more evolutionary, that higher vibration, that higher frequency, less dense environment, okay? I would put myself in that category just because that's my lens, not because I'm any better than anybody else. It's just my lens. I would tell all of us in this category up here that if we continue to judge people who are on that other people mover, we're not very enlightened. That's hard to hear, isn't it? However, our job is not to judge everybody who's not like us. That's an old world modality. That's a hypervigilance response. Really, I believe that to be a form of post-traumatic stress, where we want everybody to be a clone of us so we feel safe with them, because we don't know how to deal with the variance, because the variance has net some pretty negative things in the past. So what I would tell folks is that if you are someone who's been able to either just heal some of the past traumas in yourself or figure out coping mechanisms through this time frame, it's been a hard one, to float a little more. I know many people who are making massive changes during this time frame and letting go of fear and of trauma. They're making the decision to try something new and be somebody new, because in that decision, they have this opportunity to bring something brand new to the world that they never have before. So I do know a lot of people who are making incredible positive changes right now. Yet, if you're someone who is considering yourself to be a, quote, high vibration person or a less dense person, there are probably going to be some triggers for you that are going to be difficult to overcome if an individual is of the mind that there is only one vibration. There's not. There's millions of them. Yet I understand that for many people who are working to stay positive, a lot of folks are, quote, cutting out people, end quote, from their life that are negative. Now, I'm not suggesting that we all have to hang out with grumpy people. I'm simply, and I do highly encourage everyone who is working to be in our divided world, in that forward evolutionary vibration, okay? Everybody who wants to be in that vibration, it's very important to recognize that we may have intolerances for drama, for big, weird, boo-hoo conversations, for any of that heavy energy. The more time that you spend in a less dense environment, in a higher vibration, in a higher frequency, the less you can relate with what I like to call the tape loop of woe that happens in those more dense frequencies. That's victimizing the self all the time, martyring the self all the time. Poor me, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. When we victimize ourselves, we give away all of our power, right? So that we don't have to recognize, oh God, maybe I could have gotten my crap together and made my life better. It's a lot easier to just say, well, they made me do this. And that's different from people who truly are victimized. So please see the difference there. Yet self-victimization is a form of self-limiting behavior. So for those that are participating or attempting to be in this less dense vibration, you'll probably find that you're not doing as well hanging around with people who aren't necessarily willing to do the heavy lifting work that is necessary to go forward and shed some of these old trauma responses. And it is work. It is work to get rid of a trauma response. It's a lot of work. And some people even participate in psychedelic medicines to try to rewire the brain. That's been actually insanely successful because the brain lets go of the trauma and then makes some new wiring around new messaging. And people come out of those psychedelic experiences going, oh, dude, wait, wow. The record was skipping on a trauma, and you wire the brain differently with a plant medicine. And then the brain comes out of that and says, oh my God, I found all these workarounds. My record isn't skipping. The needle is in a different groove. This is awesome. So those folks who are leaning toward a lighter density plane, you're probably going to notice that you have a harder time with that self-victimizing behavior. And also there is a need for drama. There's an addiction to drama that, especially in America, we really have. One of the things about achieving a life that is more centered in a lighter vibration or frequency or a less dense frequency is that you can actually be in the presence of a Debbie Downer or a Donnie Downer and not be drugged down with them. It might feel a little icky. It might take a minute to adjust your own energy field so you're not taking on all of their weirdness. Yet a big marker of being able to truly be someone who is, quote, ascended or, quote, in that higher plane of existence is being able to be around others who aren't and it doesn't change you. I mean, you might notice it. If I step in dog poo, I'm going to smell it. However, we tend to be dragged down by people when they are triggering elements in us that we are still working on. And that's okay. And again, I really want to make a distinction here that folks who are operating or trying to operate in a higher frequency are no better than folks who are operating in a dense frequency. There is a balance issue going on here. And what is the balance issue about? Well, according to these angels, I want you to think about the people movers again, okay? So think about, for the sake of our discussion, yes, there are millions of dimensions and there are micro dimensions and all these things, but for the sake of our discussion, we've got these two predominant dimensions running side by side as people movers on the planet Earth. We've got low density and higher density. We've got low frequency and higher frequency, okay? Now, if we'll decide we're all just going to go high frequency at one time, everybody does it. I mean, just wow, it's Mary Poppinsville overnight. Just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. I mean, the whole thing just blows out. The physics of that are very destructive to the lower vibration. What the hell am I talking about? Well, let me break it down to some particle matter for you. Think about ultrasonic sound waves. And you direct ultrasonic sound waves at a kidney stone. Those sound waves are moving so quickly, they obliterate the kidney stone. They pulverize it into tiny pieces, sometimes even a powder, and the individual can then pass the kidney stone with less pain or no pain sometimes. So if the whole world all of a sudden just took over with the high frequency, it is literally a higher frequency. It's a higher vibration. What does it do to the more inert properties that are present in that high vibration. Well, just like the ultrasonic sound waves hitting a kidney stone, it blows it apart. Now, the universe seeks to balance itself, gang. All right? It's humans that want this instant response because we fear enduring pain as a lesson fulcrum. Yet, the universe seeks constant balance. And if we were all to go, high frequency out of nowhere, and it blows apart the inert stuff, that blows apart people's psyches. It blows apart particle matter. It could literally blow apart the planet in certain areas, certain cities, certain resources. It could blow apart people's bodies. I mean, we are talking a frequency shift of that magnitude overnight, overtaking everything, is running from the slow people mover and jumping all the way to the super fast people mover. You're not just going to fall down. You're going to get kicked off like you're on a bad bucking bronco, the last guy at the rodeo, okay? You're going to get flung. And so the universe doesn't seek to destroy. It seeks to evolve. It seeks to gently transmute. So right now we're running at about a 50-50 capacity here, and we're starting to gain ground on this higher frequency. Yet it's important to note that if that happens all at one time, it's destructive. So I know a lot of people who, in very, very well-meaning practitioners out there, who will say, out of really, I believe it to be a self-protection mechanism, they will say, I can't be around low vibration people. Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, I don't go hang around asshats at the grumpy bar either. Okay? However, I would tell you to be aware of the fact that when we execute the tiniest bit of compassion towards somebody whose sole lesson is to stay on the slower people mover, and just let them do their thing, man. Give them space to be them. Just give them space. Don't judge them. Don't rag on them. Don't proselytize to them. Don't beat them up with how slow vibration they are and fear consciousness and because basically once you become the oppressor, you're right on that people mover with them, by the way. So we all are. So it's important to remember, and sometimes we all hop on that low vibration people mover and we're like, oh crap, I'm this person now. Great. We got to pull our crap together and jump back on the people mover and try not to be such an asshat that day. So if we can allow folks their process without judging them, just allow them to group together, to commiserate. I mean, I'll appeal to those folks who were unhappy with Mr. Trump in this last many years. There's a lot of Facebook groups that folks were part of. And, the Lincoln Project. And these were groups of like-minded people who commiserated and talked about things that bothered them. And right now we're seeing an emergence of that on a different consciousness level. There's a social media site called Parler, which is actually parlay, by the way. I believe it's pronounced parlay. It's a French word that means to talk, to speak. So there's a lot of folks going over to parlay who just want to be able to bellyache and rage and moan and not be censored. And for somebody like me, on a personal level, if I can just come out of practitioner mode for a second, Parler has zero interest to me. I don't want to be around a bunch of jerky people fighting it out with one another. That's not my consciousness. I mean, I'm a very spicy person. I don't know if you've picked that up over the last couple of years of this podcast, but I got lots of opinions. And I, work really hard not to make those opinions into sword blades, and I could. However, it's not that I don't have them. I just don't see the point in raging with them unless there is something that we're trying to achieve and we need to hold a perimeter or a border for. Sometimes that needs a little bit of stewardship. And sometimes love is a blade sometimes, Sometimes love is a gate. Love isn't always just, oh, do whatever you want. I don't care. Back over the children with the truck. I don't mind. I suppose it's your lesson. I mean, that's complicity. That's not love. So love has a lot of very interesting weighted Kali the goddess Kali, who is the destroyer. If you look at it through the Western lens or the Eastern lens, she is the mother bringer of life. So it just depends on if you're looking at it through the feminine aspect or the masculine aspect. The masculine aspect is scared to death of Kali. Destroyer! Destroyer! She's a destroyer! Take her down! Arr! As opposed to the feminine looking at Kali and looking at her eradicating systems that are not functioning and bringing forward systems that will service the whole. She is the birther of a new world, Kali. So when we look at these different energies coming in and we look at this divided universe and we look at how do we actually live in a world with people who vote for racism, who vote for hatred, who vote for locking kids in cages. How do we function when those modalities of thought, for those of us that have a difficult time understanding that modality of thought, how do we function where in the United States, which is a heavy complicit culture country? How do we do it? Well, the best I can tell you, and this is still a problem that I'm working on, or a conundrum, that an equation, if you will, that I've been working with on the angels. How do you do it? The biggest recognition is to go into acceptance that we live in a divided world right now. Now, it may not be that way in 50 years, 100 years, 500 years, or it may be. Yet we do live in a world where there are two consistently running dimensions of thought. And if you can get into accepting that, then you can go to the next phase of release, because acceptance is release, according to these angels. They say that to me all the time. Acceptance is release. Acceptance is release. And what are they talking about? Well, if we go into acceptance that not everybody sees the world the way that we do, acceptance is different than condoning. It's different than agreeing with. It's very different. We just accept it's a thing. Like I can accept that water is wet. I can accept that I don't like certain kinds of music. I can accept that I love certain foods. It just is what it is. I can accept that granite is a type of stone. Okay? It's an observational capacity to accept. And really, for some people, there's a lot of emotionality that's tied to the acceptance process, especially if we're dealing with personal wounds, personal traumas, or whatnot. I would encourage everybody for this particular example of acceptance, according to these angels, to go into a form of acceptance that is non-emotional, because it's not a reflection of you. To observe that there is a stone or something on this planet made of granite called a stone has nothing to do with you at all. It is simply something that exists in the universe, and you share that universe with the stone. You see where I'm going here? Well, where they're going. I'm trying to follow them. So what I'm talking about here and what these angels are talking about is if we can get into acceptance that we do live in a divided world that is sharing dimensions with a lower, very heavy density vibration and a very high density vibration. And yes, gang, I understand there's many in between. I get it. But we're just talking about the two main points here. Then if we accept that, it's no longer our responsibility to have to change somebody else. It's not our responsibility to have to convert them to our way of thinking. Their walk, their modality, the density of hell that they live in is all theirs. And if those folks can go into acceptance that there are going to be other people on the other people mover who are going to seem like unrealistic unicorns that are going to take all their money and give it to poor people or whatever they're thinking, if they want to go ahead and just go into acceptance that there is a lighter vibration that's also operating that's more of a collective consciousness rather than a singular consciousness, and that they don't have to change us, they don't have to this, they don't have to that, that would really help them too. The difficulty is when you're operating in a lower frequency realm, that frequency is heavily dependent on groupthink or group consciousness. So hear this, gang, because this is going to challenge some folks out there that may consider themselves high vibration thinkers. Whenever we feel pressured to think something, and then we actually think that because we feel pressured to think that, we are on the slow people mover. And I know that there are a lot of people who consider themselves progressive thinkers, a lot of metaphysical thinkers that bully other people to think the way they do. And if they don't, they shame them. That's a low vibration behavior. And so it's very important that we go into acceptance with what we really act like. So when I've been talking to these angels saying, how do I help people feel empowered in a divided world? The folks who are going to remain in their density, in that heaviness, in that low frequency, they're kind of running their own program. It's a big group think pit over there. Everybody shares a very similar narrative about what's wrong, about being a victim. There are very few programs running over there compared to a lighter density situation or a higher frequency situation where there's a heck of a lot more data streams traveling at a much higher rate with all kinds of people picking and choosing what they want out of those data streams. The lower vibration dimension really does have just a few channels that it's broadcasting on. Okay? Whereas the higher frequencies have many channels. So how is that possible? Well, think about physics. This isn't a judgment or I'm not judging anybody. This is a physics issue. Okay? If you look at a frequency like a 20-band EQ, okay? And as we start going up, the higher frequencies just keep going up. Mid-range kind of starts cutting off, in my opinion, around maybe 2.5 hertz, okay? Then by the time you hit 3 hertz, you're still in the high mids, but you're starting to hit the high frequencies. Well, that goes all the way up to 20,000 hertz that are hearable through the human ear. All right? Now, if we look at our low frequencies, which one could argue we're going to start, the low mids are around 900 hertz. But really, you're starting to knock around into the low frequencies at 400 hertz, then 300, 200, and it goes down to about 40 hertz. So really from about maybe 300 hertz to 40 hertz is what the human ear can hear. Okay, now think about how much more math is involved in 3,000 kilohertz all the way up to 20,000 kilohertz on the high spectrum, all right? So we're talking about wavelength density here, gang. We're not talking about, those people are group thinking they're just slow and they're not as cool as me. We're talking about the density of wavelengths. If a person is going to participate in lower density wavelengths, they have fewer bandwidths on which to transmit by the very nature of the physics of a slower wavelength. Welcome to Engineering 101. So are you following, right? So this is why when we're looking at some of these very fringy, what are now called fringy right-wing sites, man, the narrative is practically identical. People are lockstep with the socialism. They're lockstep with government control. There are a few bumper sticker buzz phrases and everyone unites under them because there are less frequencies to broadcast on. So they've got to pick and choose. So you've got a bigger group think section of the population, which ironically, their narrative to themselves quite often is we are the patriots, we are the free thinkers. Okay. So then you go over to we'll just say the left, the far left, okay? And quite frankly, I really don't even exactly like using these political teaching points because I think it's generalizing a lot of great humans on either side of the spectrum here. However, these angels are speaking to me in easy to translate conversations. Now, so if we go over to the left side, what is the left known for? The left is known for so much infighting, it can't get its direction straight. Well, think about how many tiny frequencies of bandwidth from 3,000 to 20,000 are moving in that forward moving frequency. Okay. That's a lot. Well, it can also create a lot of dissonance. It can create a lot of white noise and confusion. So just because there are more frequencies to choose from, there is a lot of chaos that can happen in that forward-thinking, evolutionary, high vibration, high density area if we are not clear about why we're there. And this isn't to say that the left is enlightened and the right is not enlightened. That's not it. I was just using some political talking points to illustrate the point of groupthink and vibrational aptitudes. Now, this is why on the left we have the progressives. There are some elements of the left that try to get everybody to groupthink and war and rage. And that'll last for a little bit, but then everybody on the left is like, can we go back to just like hugging a tree and banging a drum and eating some special banana bread and just, chilling with some good wine and Napa? Come on, you guys. So again, this isn't to say that lefties are enlightened and people on the right are not. That's not it at all. I know very enlightened people on the right who have been very disgusted with the way things have been going for the last 4 years. So what I would tell you is the fear vibration, there's lots of people on the left who are on the slow people mover of the fear vibration. Tons of them. Tons of people on the left are on the slow people mover because they're obsessed with the drama. They're obsessed with who's going to bring Mitch McConnell down. They're obsessed with what's Trump doing? What's he doing next? What's he doing next? That's the slow people mover, gang. Okay? That's the slow people mover. So as you can see, the slow people mover has all kinds of people on it. The fast people mover has all kinds of people on it. And we're running at about 50%. So it's very important in our level of acceptance to not think we're more righteous than anybody else, because we just aren't. And that's part of this acceptance process. How do I help empower people in a divided world? Well, quite honestly, the folks on the lower bandwidth, the folks on the slow people mover are not interested in my brand of empowerment. I have accepted that. There was a time when I felt like a failure because of that. I felt like I wasn't translating well enough. I felt like I wasn't reaching those people. Maybe I wasn't using the right words, or I wasn't listening to the correct angel messages or whatever. I took it very personally. And then it's been made known to me in this observational capacity that I've been in for the last 4 years, which, can I just tell you, has not been that fun. All right? It's kind of sucked. But we all have to do the work. Gang, we all have to do the work. We've got to do our own work. And we've got to figure out what it is that we're doing that keeps us in these drama loops and these post-traumatic stress loops and all of these things. We've got to figure out how to go into acceptance that maybe that's where we're at, and how do we get off that low vibration people mover? Like I said, the right and left are both on it. Base level politics are both on the slow people mover. We have very high vibrating people on those slow people movers. They make a decision to kind of station themselves in an outpost vibration to try to raise it up. But the base vibration of old world politics is to fight. It's the worst of negative aspects of genetic tribalism that we've got. And I'm not talking about indigenous worlds people or the tribes. I'm talking about when everybody were in Neanderthal tribes all around the world and whacked people on the head with a rock. So when we're looking at all of this, if you are a lefty that thinks there's only one way to do things, you're on the slow people mover. If you are a righty that thinks that you're a victim and it's all gone to hell and everybody's taking everything from you, you're on the slow people mover. You know, the fast people mover says, I go into acceptance that you are in a different space than I am. Now, where this gets tricky is when we need to step up to help people who are being victimized. This is why I think it's very important to delineate between acceptance and tolerance. But to accept that the whole world is not just going to be unicorn and rainbows doesn't mean the whole world sucks. This is not a sum total game. So again, going back to the fact that I had to accept that there was probably 50% of this population that angelic messages were not going to appeal to. Helping the self was not going to appeal to. Picking your damn self up by your underpants and having to deal with your own hard grown-up lessons wasn't going to appeal to. It wasn't. that we're miracle machines and we can bring through healing to our bodies and to our lives, that message isn't going to appeal to 50% of people because it will defy their victim consciousness. And then who the hell are they day to day? Then they got to really be responsible for things. So it's taken me years and years to not take personally the vibrational choice of others. And once in a while, I still do. I'm a human being. I can get my feelings hurt with the best of them. Good Lord, I'm a Pisces with a Leo moon and a Cancer rising. I can get my feelers hurt. I'm Italian. I can get my feelers hurt. Yet, somebody's really got to catch me a bit off guard for that to be happening because for the most part, I kind of have an eyeball on things and I kind of know where my own trigger points are. And when I get my feelings hurt, oftentimes I'll sit with that hurt and I'll have a conversation with it. And I'll say, wow, hello, Mr. Butthurt. Where'd you come from? And Mr. Butthurt will be like, well, I was just hanging out here, see, and you got your feelers hurt over XYZ. And so I'm just a throbbing away like a big old thorn in your side. And I said, well, Mr. Butthurt, why? I thought I took care of these issues that would have put you in place. And, Mr. Butthurt, it's a butt, so I don't know. Maybe it rips off some gas or in my general direction, gives me a salutations fart and says, well, clearly you didn't take care of it because here I am. So what do you want to talk about, chickadee? And we have a conversation. And so it is a process, this acceptance, because it also means accepting in us that we may not be this enlightened, beautiful individual that never gets hurt. That's a form of escapism, gang. I'm sorry. I struggle as a practitioner in this field sometimes with the same zealousness that shows its face in the metaphysical field as does in the heavy evangelical religious movement. I mean, I really struggle with that kind of zealousness. Like, you must believe everything I believe. I cannot even express to all of you the amount of single-spaced, run-on sentence, no punctuation, super long emails I received because I posted a picture of myself and my wife wearing a mask on Instagram and said, hey, everybody mask up. My stepmom's a doctor, and she explained in detail what this virus does to people, and it's pretty terrible. So, I was just like, hey, mask up, everybody. I received the most, I would consider them psychotic emails, quite frankly, from people raging at me that I was fear-based, I was full of fear, I was fear consciousness. If I really was an angelic channel, I would never get sick because I would really be able to embody the high vibration of the angels. I was called a fraud, a phony, a fake. I was called, all kinds of things. Lots of female body parts I got called. Fascinating. So, and I'm sitting here thinking, wow, all these people who don't even believe in their own thought process, that some person on Instagram posts a picture wearing a mask and says, hey, everybody mask up, is such a threat to their, quote, high vibration world. And at that point, that's delusion, that's denial, and it's escapism. Because if we really want to pretend that darkness doesn't exist, that there's not a slow vibration, if we want to pretend that it's all good to get by, well, rock on. If you can do that without casting judgment on others, honest to God, go for it. I think that sounds super. Honestly, that's like a good martini and a foot rub at the same time. If you can pull that off, go for it. Yet what I find is that protection of the delusional border, and I'm gonna go right out there and call it a delusional border, gets violent because whenever you shake somebody's delusion, people will become violent. Talk to the mental health community about that. And all I'm saying to you today, gang, is that in order to truly shine in this new realm that we're building together, and we're building it with everybody. We're building it with the slow people mover folks. We're building it with the higher, faster people mover folks. We are building it together. And we cannot just blast out the happy pill on everybody because it will be destructive for many people's personal growth. It's not all about me. It's not all about you. It's not all about the left. It's not all about the right. It's about acceptance. We have got to accept that human beings will never, ever be of like mind. Yet the goal in the new realm is to have us come to a place where we are willing to be of like heart. Like heart is what we are aiming for. The old world insecurities wanted everybody to think the same way. That was the sociopathic, narcissistic, sadistic, old world, heavy-fisted, imbalanced portion of the masculine leadership. Insecure, man, super insecure. Yet that's not the way of the new realm. So we can still be in acceptance that maybe we're running at about 50% on the slow vibration with the high vibration people mover. We can be in acceptance of that. It doesn't mean that our good works in the world are any less effective. It begins to free you from feeling drowning in other people's spiritual lessons. And I truly hope, I don't think I have many slow people mover listeners on this podcast, but if I do, you are so welcome, man. I love you. Be here with all of us because we are all part of the solution. You're amazing. And I probably look like a crazy unicorn to you. That's okay. Because I am in acceptance that your way doesn't have to be my way. And here's the biggest jazz hands ending of the whole podcast is, according to these angels, going into this place of acceptance not only frees us from conversion of everybody else or from the burden of having to get people to be in our reflection, which again, narcissism, gross. Nobody wants to be that person, right? Yet if we can come into this acceptance, what that is the big, fat F word. Not the one you're thinking. It is faith. It is faith in a bigger system that is operating outside of our parameters and capacity to understand it, to go into acceptance that there's going to be slow people mover folks and fast people mover folks, to be okay with it, to stand up and be a steward of a loving, sometimes blade-oriented perimeter to help people who are being victimized. But then once that perimeter is established, not to go after everybody else who doesn't agree with you. I mean, the law is going to go after people who human traffic and victimize and do all of that. That's what the law is for. Yet if our energies can be that, not of eradication, but of stopping the flow of, just like a dam, and letting it flow around, because that energy is going to be persistent no matter what. And being able to create a safe space for people to go. That's where the balance starts. And if we can go into that acceptance and be a firewall for whatever it is you are called to be a firewall for, yet do not then hop the firewall and pursue those that you do not agree with a weapon, be it of your heart, your tongue, your mind. Just make the firewall, man, and then walk away. And let those who are the warriors, let those whose job is that, to bring others to account. Let the law work. Let karma work. This is called faith in a system bigger than us. And what human beings are singularly lacking as a species at this time, due to our technology, due to our larger brains, due to our interconnected first worlds that created a vibe on the earth, due to all our satellites, we are missing faith in anything that is outside of our ability to affect it. And that is delusion. So if we as a human species can come out of a deluded space, go into acceptance, release that which isn't yours, and begin to have faith that something is working on a larger system. When you eat food and you chew your food and you swallow your food, you are not micromanaging every single thing. You're not, okay, glottal muscles, shove that food down into my stomach. Okay, stomach, release the acid. Okay, now let's break down. Okay, bloodstream, let's circulate all of this food to places that we need to circulate it to. We're not doing that. We're not doing any of that. We are having faith that our body is handling it. So one of the very first steps I can give you in this acceptance exercise, okay, is Have faith that you are part of a larger system, that you are a cell in that system, and that system is working on the outside of you, and your job is to achieve your one function, and your one function is to go into acceptance with where you truly are at in life, who you really are, what you're afraid of, what your freaking superpowers are, and that you're not going to be able to change everybody. And that's okay, because it doesn't make the folks you can't, quote, change your enemy any more than it doesn't. If I'm somebody over there looking at me and they want to change me, they're not going to change me. I want them to change them. I'll change me. If we all go into our own acceptance that it's okay that people are different than we are, and then go ahead and, like I said, let the law and let other things work it out, we will, all of us on the slow and fast people movers, we will raise this vibration of the planet unilaterally where nobody is blowing anybody apart. So breathe and relax. Okay? I know so many people out there who are devastated that 70 million plus people voted for a person in office who has exhibited so many malignant narcissistic traits and has been such a bully and has been such an angry person. So many people are so devastated by the choice of 70 million people that it's shutting them down because they're frightened to share a world with those folks. Gang, don't shut down. I got news for you. If you didn't vote for Trump, those 70 million people are shutting down because they're equally afraid of you. You see? We don't need to fear each other. We don't. Let's just have a little respect for everybody's process here. Go into acceptance that right now we live in a divided world. And be the best human being you can. And continue to sow love. Continue to be a firewall for love. Continue to watch those boundaries and be a steward for all that is grand. Continue to disassociate if you find it is your walk from things that are a slower vibration that drag you down. Yet do so not out of judgment, but out of acceptance that it simply is not your way. It simply is not your way. And as my dear friend Donna Ostermeyer, who's a wonderful practitioner here in Billings, Montana, would say, tuck all those folks who don't agree with you into their nine-eye bed. Just tuck them in and tuck their little covers in and just tuck them in for their nine-eye, because they're not going to understand you and you're not going to understand them. And that's okay. Go into acceptance that right now there's a bigger picture that's playing itself out that requires some sort of scale balance as we begin to unilaterally lift the vibration of the planet. Are you following these angels? I hope this has been helpful. And it's going to push some buttons especially for heavy right-wing activists, heavy left-wing activists. It's what do you mean? I just have to lay down and take it and I can't. This is my cause. Well, have your cause. Yet recognize your cause may or may not be everybody else's cause. And it's okay to group together with the folks that are like-minded for that cause. That is a like attracts like issue, even though like-hearted is what we're aiming for. Yet humanity is like-hearted, not like-minded. And this is the transition we're making in this time frame. This is why it's scary. This is why we don't know what to do. Because our old sociopathic system wanted us to be clones of the leaders, like-minded. But we're working for like-hearted, and that's a whole different thing. And it's scary because we don't get it yet. So acceptance is release. Release yourself from being miserable just because people didn't vote like you. Anybody listening out there. That becomes an excuse for you to not shine. Go ahead and have grief. Go ahead and have grief if you're going into acceptance and you're looking at a lot of darkness in the world and it gives you grief. I mean, I went through years of grief this last 4 years going, I cannot believe people actually are on board with certain modalities. That's not my lens. It wasn't anywhere in my mind that people would agree ever with separating kids at the border and putting kids in cages. And I mean, it just blew me away, the grief that my fellow humans could in any way think that was okay. But that's just my own emotionality through my lens. And so go through your grieving. Yet after you get through that, go into your acceptance. that everybody is here for a reason and you are meant to divinely shine, man. I mean, nobody gets to shut down our joy, but we do. So go into some faith that even though you might be grieving, even though some of my friends on the right are grieving right now because they think the whole country is just taking a crap into the socialist toilet, just go into your grief, yet understand past the grief that grieving oftentimes is something that we do when we fear a loss of something or we experience a loss, when that loss oftentimes can be connected to our identity or livelihood or who we think we are, which is a little different than grieving a loved one. So just be aware of all this, okay? Have faith. Go into acceptance and shine. Because as my grandpa used to say, ain't nobody in charge of your own shine but you. So spin on it, rip it with a rag until you can see your own reflection in your own shine. All right, gang, go shine. And I will see you next podcast.